Hello, welcome to Trump 47 Watch. Today's episode deals with a particular item pertaining to the federal sector. Specifically, the United States House of Representatives passed the Protect America's Workforce Act on December 11th, 2025. I'm Merrick Masters, professor of business, emeritus, commentator, podcaster, and author. You can find me at my YouTube channel. Today is December the 16th, 2025. The Protect America's Workforce Act has significant implications should it become law if passed by the Senate and signed into law by the President for the collective bargaining rights of federal employees. The text of the Protect America's Workforce Act as passed by the House is provided here. The legislation as passed by the House nullifies the executive order issued by President Trump on March 27th of this year, entitled Exclusions from Federal Labor Management Relations Programs. It also specifies that collective bargaining agreements in place at the time of the enactment of the executive order on March 27th will remain in force once the executive order is rescinded. The legislation, as I said, passed the U.S. House of Representatives on December the 11th by a vote of 231 to 195. 20 House Republicans voted for the legislation. The legislation now proceeds for consideration by the U.S. Senate, where the Senate version has co-sponsors of 48 senators. Some of the language of the executive order itself, as presented here, indicates that the President determined that numerous federal agencies have as a primary function intelligence, counterintelligence, investigative, or national security work, and thus should be removed from the protection of the Federal Service Labor Management Relations Statute. Excuse me. A partial list of departments excluded from the executive order include the Department of State, most of the Department of Defense, most of the Department of Treasury, the Departments of Veteran Affairs, and the Department of Justice. There were many other agencies and sub-units within agencies that were specified in this particular statute or executive order, which impacted about 1 million federal workers. According to a report by the Center for American Progress, under the Trump administration so far in 2025, 1.1 million federal workers have lost their collective bargaining rights out of a total of 1.3 million who are represented. Among the agencies that have eliminated collective bargaining rights, along with the number of workers who have lost their collective bargaining rights, is presented in this table, which shows that among the top 4 agencies, you have close to 1 million people who have lost their collective bargaining rights just in those agencies. Previous executive orders removing federal agencies from protections for grounds of national security have been narrowly drawn in terms of their scope. Executive Order 12171, issued by President Carter on November 19, 1979, removed the U.S. Secret Service agency plus a few other smaller agencies from protection of collective bargaining rights. President Reagan issued an Executive Order 12559 on May 20th, 1986, which removed the U.S. Marshal Service from protection of the Federal Service Labor Management Relations Statute. And President Carter issued an order on November 26, 2008. President Bush issued an executive order on November 26, 2008, 13480, that removed several small units, including the Office of Military Advisor of the Department of Homeland Security, from the protection of the collective bargaining statute. A few observations. The Executive Order 14251 seems unlikely to survive a Democratic-controlled Congress should it be elected in 2026. The scope of the order far exceeds the exclusions specified in the statute and preceding presidential orders. Past exclusions had obvious connections to security intelligence functions. The Executive Order 14251 includes in its orbit many classes of employees who have no evident security intelligence aspects to their jobs. The subject of national security exclusions to the Federal Service Labor Management Relations Statute deserves much more precise legislative attention to determine exactly what should fall under its excludable orbit, particularly given this action by President Trump. I hope you've enjoyed this presentation. Here's a little bit about myself. I'll be following this and other developments in the federal sector under Trump 47 very closely and reporting on them periodically. Thank you and have a good day.